When I first started my company, Raintree Media, we used the tagline, "Let's help you express yourself." Our guest today offers to help people do just that as well. Rakesh Godhwani is a communications expert and the founder of the School of Meaningful Experiences. Interestingly enough, he gave up a career in the corporate world to take up teaching. Welcome to the show, Rakesh.
Thank you, Sandhya. Such a great pleasure to be here with you.
So let's just get started with trying to understand why is communications so important and who should be learning how to communicate and why.
Sandhya, the largest activity human beings do besides breathing is communicating with one another and with themselves. And unfortunately, we realize the value of this subject only when we are preparing to go into the corporate world and realizing that our marks and the certificates that we spend so much of time on really doesn't help us get things done. And I started to realize this very early on in my life and my career. And in my UG program, I realized that one is that you can spend all your time in the library memorizing those answers to get marks. And the second thing was you could find a way to get your marks aside and swift through the system using variety of other techniques which are equally important to do in the corporate world. And I started to invest a lot of time in reading and connecting with people, and I found that a lot more enjoyable and meaningful experience, which helped me shape my thoughts and the way I spoke. And when it came to the interview in my final year, I think it was Wipro, and Wipro picks up the brightest students as measured by the marks and the rank. And I was way down in my class, but by some quirk of fate, I landed in the interview room. And this person asked me 5 questions, and I answered all 5 of them wrong. But we had a very good conversation because I was able to ask questions. I was able to connect with this person. And he said to me that, Rakesh, you are the worst engineer I've seen in my life. Uh, but you are a person who can handle a conversation with the client and with the colleagues, which I find missing in students, because when we bring them to a corporate world, they are very good at looking at some engineering problem and trying to solve it, but that's not enough. You have to talk and collaborate and convince others. And I think you are a person who knows those skills better, and I will make you an engineer in 1 month. And that was the revealing fact of my life that, okay, there is something called communication, which is about connecting with people. It's about expressing yourself. It's about shaping each other's thoughts. So I started investing more time on that. And my career took a very good curve. And I was very happy with that. So I started teaching it to others and thoroughly loved it way back in 1999 onwards. And I had 2 jobs. So I became like a weekday corporate professional and a weekend teacher for anybody who wanted to learn how to speak. So, coming to your question, I think this subject is very important in the 21st century because the world will become a very populated place. We are going to grow to a 10 billion kind of a earth in the next 30 years. And technology will bring us together, and ideas will be exchanged a lot more faster than what they were 100 years ago. And in this dynamic, the ability of a person to think on their feet, connect with the other person, shape their ideas and change their perspectives so that your work gets done is a mission critical skill that everybody must have. In fact, if you ask the world on the top 5 skills, I won't be surprised that the ability to communicate would be in those top 5 skills.
That's interesting. talking about your corporate career and your practice as a teacher now, I'm sure there have been instances where you've been completely taken aback by the kind of misunderstandings that happen because of wrong communication. Could you cite some examples where you think something majorly has gone wrong, either at the workspace or in the learning, just because the communication has been not right?
Oh, millions of examples. That's how I've learned, and that's how I keep learning that this subject is so infinite. It's like an ocean, and the recipe exists, but then the way the dish comes out, the audience, the way they taste that dish, and the way the chef has made it are very, very different. So there is no guarantee that the same formula will work for everyone, which means you could do everything by the book, but then in that room things will go wrong. So there was this very interesting episode that I witnessed where people fought with each other just because the tone with which you spoke was a little bit questionable. And a simple thing, how you say, "What are you doing?" can be interpreted in a millions of ways, right? So you send an email to a person. Emails are the worst forms of communication because the other person can interpret anything they want. So your intention while typing those words, "What are you doing?" could be as follows: "What are you doing?" But when the email goes to the other person, he will read as, "What are you doing?" And all hell breaks loose. So people start to justify, this becomes a conflict, this becomes a fight, and you lose relationships, and the work doesn't get done. In many instances, when I was in after Wipro, I went to Intel and then Qualcomm before I left and became a teacher. Um, we worked with customers where the customers would understand something because of their culture and the way they thought, and we would understand differently. So it took us a lot of time, and I worked especially with Japanese customers and Chinese customers. And it helped that I was an Indian because the cultures are so similar, and I was very close to my American counterparts as well. So a very simple sentence that "sorry, we can't do this" can be treated so wrongly by the Japanese and the Chinese because those cultures can't hear no that easily as compared to a American culture. In America, it's very normal for people to assert themselves. But in India and Japan and China, we are highly power driven index organizations, which means the power must get the yes at all times. So, how do you say that no is an art in itself? And I learned it by saying no, getting reprimanded. Then somebody taught me that here is how you say a better no, and I picked it up. I think the way you learn this subject is only by mistakes, which is a very classical problem in student life. That the way we learn in many countries is by memorizing, and you cannot memorize communication. There is no one formula. You have to just try it, see the feedback. If it works, you learn something new. If it doesn't work, go back to your drawing boards and try all over again.
Interesting. And that leads me to my next question to you. When you say you teach people how to communicate better, what exactly do you teach them?
This is the first point I believe in is this movie called Ratatouille that anybody can cook. It's a very fascinating movie. And I come from that philosophy that anybody should and can learn how to express themselves better, especially in the oral aspect. All of us by nature are not designed to just stand up and speak. Standing up and speaking is an extreme form of art. Even having conversations is very difficult. Many of us are very comfortable being with ourselves and with our best friends and just managing our lives. So, what I do is I believe that this subject is scientific, that is very important. There is amazing literature that comes in. I've done a PhD on that. So, I understand the science of how this subject can shape lives. And in my classrooms, I bring the science with assignments, with cases, with feedback. And a lot of work is on feedback. So we show people what they do. We give them ideas on how they can wordsmith better. And then slowly, with time, commitment, and practice, results do come. So I talk about this that Just like how you can be a great mathematician or an economist, you can be a great communicator. And there is no reason why you cannot be a great communicator. Uh, the only point is that it requires that time, patience, and commitment, which is what my classrooms are all about. One other problem I try and solve is that this subject requires a lot of trust to be built in the teaching system. And my role is not to be a powerful expert, but a learner myself. And that environment of trust and respect is very important for learn, because if you criticize someone, then this person will never learn. This subject requires encouragement, requires positive reinforcement, requires self analysis and critical thinking by the learner. So I do all of that, and the results are very, very fascinating. And that's what my mission is, that I want to take this subject to millions of people so that they can become more confident and communicate better.
So, from teaching management students and coaching startups and senior managers in established companies to teaching school students, how did that come about?
So I left the corporate world in 2008, started teaching in any classroom I could go in. Was fortunate that my alma mater, Bangalore, took me as the head of alumni, and also after a few years let me teach as adjunct faculty. Consider myself very privileged by how I get nice treatment by them. I don't deserve it, honestly. But then what I started to see was that when I started teaching MBA students, I started to find out that the problems they face at the age of 23 to 25, the root cause is actually when they were 15 and 16 or maybe even younger. And I experienced this myself as a learner, that when we were kids, maybe in the classroom we were reprimanded by the teacher because the systems are so different. But that fear has caused me not to raise any questions anymore. And then I started that, okay, I think I have to take this subject not only to senior executives, but also to young teenagers and pre-teenagers. So in 2016, I I think it was a summer, and April, May, you're fairly relaxed and enjoying the summer vacations. And my neighbor came to me and said, Rakesh, my daughter needs to learn. So I said, all right, why don't I do a summer camp? And jumped into the summer camp without knowing how teenagers live, how they are. And I have a teenage son at that time. I had, and now he's becoming a young adult. I thought I would ace this because I know how to handle a 25-year-old. It was a disaster, Sandhya, because these teenagers are so smart. And that's what opened my eyes, that we assume that these kids don't know anything. But I was so wrong. They know 100 times more than what I know. What I then learned was that my job is to shape their thoughts, not tell them what to do. And that became the the seeds for School of Meaningful Experiences, that I was assuming that we have to really teach teenagers. I completely was miscalculating, misjudging them. Teenagers are very smart. They have high IQs. They are lazy, just like I was when I was a teen. And even Aristotle said that in 350 BC, that these youngsters are very irresponsible. They don't know what they're eating. They don't take care of themselves. So if someone said this in 350 BC, the same thing applies today. And what School of Meaningful Experiences then started to do was create programs for that. And that's how we launched. And it has been a fascinating journey, because we now have created programs not only for 13 to 17, we have started 9 to 12, 18 to 21, 21 to 30, and now we offer programs all the way to CXO levels of 55.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spotlight with Sandhya. I look forward to seeing your comments. Do like the Raintree Media channel, subscribe, and share. You can also listen to this interview as a podcast on Google, Spotify, or many other platforms. Keep watching. Take care and bye-bye.